welcome to the novella episode. Hello everyone, my name is Jenna, but you guys can call me Jen. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome to a recommendation video that centers mostly around novellas or shorter books that I think are fantastic books to get you out of a reading slump. Or if you're like me and often don't really get into reading slumps, but you do get into weird reading moods where like you want to be reading when nothing is doing it and you kind of want a palate cleanser, this is the list for you. This is also a great novella recommendation list, so it's just a list for all things. I have a stack of novellas and shorter novels, and then I have a stack of books that are also shorter, and then ones that I remember reading in like one day that I just couldn't put down, kind of a thing. First up, caveat, as I said just before, I don't usually get into reading slumps. I get into weird reading moods. And I think that, you know, upon retrospection, this probably could be considered a reading slump by some people, but I very rarely get into the place where like, I don't want to read at all. Nothing is working, so I'm just like, no, I don't want to read at all. Usually life gets in the way, like I'm balancing my writing more than my reading, kind of a thing. But I do quite often get into these moods where my brain is just like, give me something other than fantasy or whatever I've been reading, a certain tone maybe, and give me something that like completely resets the board, starts us from zero so that we can get back into the reading game, or something that I can read in a really quick sitting, if you will. When I'm in a weird reading place, I usually reread books. So that is my first thing that I will say. I reread favorite books, and most often it's a Percy Jackson. So I will go back to that world because I know I can finish the first book, The Lightning Thief, in like a couple hours. And I know it's going to be just a fantastic ride because I've read that book so many times and it just immediately makes me feel so cozy and at home. So definitely reread books, ones that you know you love, revisiting that and reading something sometimes that your brain knows really well, especially because this is an anxiety thing. Rewatching and rereading stuff that you know really, really well, your brain has a chance to relax and just kind of chill out. I don't know, I find it easy to reread because of that, and it's one of my favorite things to do because one, it's very relaxing and it's like you're letting your brain kind of revisit a world that it really, really loves and knows, and then you're also just, well, I don't know, rereads are the best because then you catch more details and you kind of experience the story all over again in a new way and all that good stuff. But that's what I usually do when I am in a weird reading mood. Or I go and I completely change up the genre that I'm in. So fantasy girly, if you couldn't tell by the shelves behind me, and if you are new to my channel, hello. So usually when I'm kind of getting tired of one kind of fantasy, I will try a different one, a different tone, something cozy, something more upbeat. Or if I've been reading a lot of that, I will go full epic, like Robin Hobb or Brandon Sanderson level, just so I can really sink my teeth into it. Or hard stop, jump out of fantasy, go to romance or thrillers, something else that is quick and snappy and easy to get through that gives me a palate cleanser. So those are my tips for you if you are in a weird reading mood or a weird reading slump. I also recommend finding shorter books that are really nice to get through because then you, one, are getting through an entire book and giving yourself that boost of serotonin that you give yourself from reading a book. Two, you're getting through it so fast. And three, they're all fantastic. And I've used some of these myself to get out of those weird reading moods. So let's jump in. First up, the novellas. First up here, we have one that's gonna be perfect for fall for my people who want to do this and want to do it with a contemporary read. And that is If the Broom Fits by my lovely friend Sarah Sutton. This is her Halloween novella that she wrote. It is one of my favorite things that she has written. It is the perfect pack of wonderful romance. Honestly, I don't like YA contemporary romance at all, but Sarah Sutton has something in her books that makes them, majority of them are 5 stars for me. Like it's unreal. She writes fantastic relationships and stories. I love them so much. This is a shot of pumpkin spice latte. It is beautiful and quick and just stunning. All right, then we're gonna get into our Becky Chambers world here because we got 3 from Becky Chambers, which we love. So one of her novellas that isn't tied to anything else, it's a standalone novella, is To Be Taught If Fortunate. This is a little bit more of a hard-hitting novella. It's space, but like Becky Chambers, especially in her Wayfarer series, she is so good at connecting these big space operatic moments with very, very human emotions and bringing us down just to the minutia of every day. This is fantastic. This follows a crew aboard a ship researching some stuff, and that's all I'm gonna tell you because it's a novella and that's all you need to know. It is lovely. I think I gave this 3.5 stars when I read it originally. It's due for a reread because I love Becky Chambers and I feel like if I'm in the right mood for it, this would be just perfect. It's not necessarily sad, it's just like the existential cry, which you're gonna also get with her other novellas, Song for the Wild Built and Prayer for the Crowned Shy. So these are a novella duology, but I highly recommend you read them both just like in one go. Treat them as one. You don't have to because they're both little and novellas as their own, and they're such quick reads. You can get them done in a couple hours. The audiobooks are also really great for these. That's another recommendation. Pick up an audiobook if you're finding yourself struggling through stuff. Pick up an audiobook and do what I do. Pick up an audiobook and read the book physically at the same time. You'll find your focus just so honed in. And even if you kind of get distracted for a moment, you're still listening to the story. So you're still getting the story and you're not really fully pulling yourself out of it if you look away from the page, for example. That's how I get through my books. That's how I read so many so quickly, usually. But yes, these are both wonderful. These follow Dex and Mosscap. Dex is a tea merchant, if you will, trying to find purpose in the world. And Mosscap is a robot who has recently decided to come back into humanity and ask some questions. It's a beautiful utopian sci-fi fantasy leaning world. It's a slice of life every day. It makes you think. It tells you it's okay to go slow. These are some of my favorite books of all time. I love it, love it, love it. Another 3, all P. Djeli Clark. So imagine there are 3 all P. Djeli Clark because there is one more novella of his that I do not own. And that novella and this one are part of the same world, which is also part of his Master of Jinn world. But the novellas come before that novel. And this one specifically, The Haunting of Tramcar 015, follows 2 different agents, Agent Hamid and Agent Ansi, and they are investigating a haunted tramcar. And it's wonderful because you do see the characters from the other novella, which I believe is A Dead Jinn in Cairo. I think that's what it's called. And that novella follows the character from A Master of Jinn. So they're all in the same world, same like agents of magic stuff in a magical Cairo. P. Djeli Clark has a exceptional knack for beautifully descriptive novellas that get you everything you want of character and world and the story and the situation all in one go. You want more, but not in the way of like, this wasn't enough. Like it was a perfect amount. It's an exact like couple TV show length of a book, you know? It's exactly what you want in a novella. And that goes for his other novella, The Black Cloud's Drums. This one was so enchanting. It's got sky pirates in it, and that's all I'm gonna tell you. It's very good. P. Djeli Clark is exceptional, and I'm so excited to see what other novellas and other novels that he comes out with. The other one that I held up just then is The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Niveau. I believe this is book 1. I could be incredibly wrong. Book 1 of an entire, there's a name for this series. I think it's Singing Hills? I could be so wrong. But yeah, I think this is the first one, The Empress of Salt and Fortune. And this kicks off a novella series of Niveau's. And I believe I've read the first 2 because I don't know if when I read the second one, the third one was out yet. I'm not sure. I don't know, but it's a novella series that follows one character. And I believe it's Cleric going around getting stories from people. I think that's what the whole like gimmick of the whole series is. I didn't super love the first one, but the second one was absolutely fantastic. It's the one with the tiger on the front. I don't remember the name of it though. But all of these novellas are just enchanting stories. And just like P. Djeli Clark, like it's all you need. This story is the story. There's really nothing else going on. I think they're wonderful, and I do need to pick up the other ones in this novella series, but definitely a good choice, especially if you like the lyricism of storytelling. Then we get to a author that I also have a larger novel to talk about. I can't remember if it's over 300 pages or not, but this author has written some of my favorite stuff, and they are Canadian as well, and I just really enjoy it. So this is Even Though I Knew the End by C.L. Polk. This is a novella. This is a noir novella about vampires and angels, and a magical detective dives into the affairs of Chicago's divine monsters to secure a future with the love of her life. It's sapphic as well, which is exceptional. So definitely this. I really enjoyed the atmosphere of this one, and I love C.L. Polk's writing. And the novel that I'm talking about by them as well is Witchmark, which is the first of a trilogy that I think every single one of those books is just a banger. All of them, like 4.5, 5 stars. So good. And I read them all in a day, like of each other, like in a couple hours, because they're just so compulsively readable. They are the kind of fantasy romance that I love. Like, I don't necessarily think they would be classified as fantasy romance, like to what other people think on the book internet is fantasy romance, like with smutty scenes and stuff like that. But Witchmark is the first in that trilogy, and it is just fantastic. And each one of these stories are queer, which is exceptional. And each one of them are narrated by a different person in this world. And all three kind of go over one event that happens over a couple weeks, I think. I don't remember the exact timeline, but it's fantastic. It's Edwardian fantasy romance. And the first one is gay, which is just exceptional. And I really, really, really enjoyed those. All right, the last official novella on this list, before we get into the shorter novels, is my favorite novella of all time. It's Spear by Nicola Griffith. This is a gender-bent retelling of a myth from around Camelot. So the time of Arthur and Merlin. This is a retelling of the myth of Paratar, who is a figure from myth who has multiple names. He does show up in a lot of different myths with different names. This is one specific story of Paratar. Gender bent, so Paratar in here, she is amazing and she becomes like a knight. That is like her story. It's very lyrically told. It's absolutely gorgeous. And it's also sapphic and just so good. I need to reread it, but yes. Arthurian, wonderful, beautiful storytelling. Pick it up. I also have a sticky note on my monitor to the side here that has other ones that I'm talking about that I don't actually physically own. And so we're gonna talk about T. Kingfisher next, because of course I have to talk about T. Kingfisher. So I own 4 of her books, but I'm gonna talk about these 2 because one of them I didn't love and the other one I have not yet read. And it's surprisingly thick. So we'll ignore Paladin's Grace for now, but these 2 are fantastic. And also What Moves the Dead. So let's talk about, we'll talk about the 2 horror ones first, because T. Kingfisher writes in both fantasy and horror and often bridges the 2. When I was in this particular terrible reading mood, which is actually what inspired this video when I originally thought of it, put it on my list of videos to film, I needed something quick and snappy and in a different genre that I could just finish in one sitting and just get it all at once and really enjoy it, you know? So I picked up House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. This, I gave 3.5 stars, but I still really enjoyed it. And for me, who isn't usually a horror or thriller reader, and who has read a few of them, but not isn't very versed in them, this was definitely a fun time. And it did what I wanted it to do. And it definitely helped that weird reading mood that I was in. This is, again, because it's such a tiny, short little novel, how do I describe this? So it's about Sam. She goes and stays with her mom, who is currently living in Sam's grandma's old house. And Sam's brother is like, something's up with mom. And so Sam shows up, and there's also something weird with the house. And I'll leave it there. It's fun. Generational horror, if you will. And then the other one is What Moves the Dead. I love this book. This is my favorite horror book that I've read. And since then, I have seen so many people just disappointed with it. And I don't know whether that's because I am an English major and I read the short story that this is based off of, The Fall of the House of Usher, which is also a deceptively tiny little short story by Edgar Allan Poe. What Moves the Dead is I want to say a rewriting of the What Moves the Dead, because it is fairly faithful, from what I remember, to the source material. It just fleshes it out a little bit more. It adds that fungal horror vibe to it. I think there's sporer. Is it spore horror? Sporer? There's a term for it. I'm not in the horror world, but this one it really did it for me. As someone who doesn't really read horror a lot, but absolutely loves T. Kingfisher, this one just really did it for me. It was like 5 stars. But yeah, if you're looking for a quick, creepy read, What Moves the Dead is your bet. Of course, I gotta talk about my favorite book from T. Kingfisher, which is Nettle and Bone, which is a really short, snappy, cozy, adjacent, dark fairy tale with teeth kind of a story. Follows Mara as she goes and saves her sister from an abusive husband, abusive relationship, and she has to do a bunch of witchy tasks and gather a couple people to help her on this. It's very good. The found family is wonderful, and it's also short enough that you could get through it in one sitting. And I really enjoyed this for so many reasons. Bone dog. There's a dog made out of bones in here. It's amazing. And a chicken who's possessed by demon. I love it. All right, the only other one I have left is All Systems Red by Martha Wells. This is the only Murderbot book that I've read, but I keep wanting to read more. I just want to own the physical copies of Murderbot before I do, because I liked the first one so much. It is short, snappy, incredibly relatable sci-fi, even though you're reading from a robot. Like, all Murderbot wants to do is sit and consume content and not talk to the outside world, because it just makes him anxious. It's so wonderful. Because it's also a series, like, it's a lot of little books, and then I think one of the later books is an actual novel. I think it's such a fantastic, intriguing world. But yeah, definitely try All Systems Red, which is the first one, to get a taste of a little bit of sci-fi, a little bit of relatable storytelling from Martha Wells and her Murderbot character. Let's go to our bigger novels. So I'm including these specifically because I, one, have read them in one day, or I think they're perfect to get out of this weird reading mood, and they're a little bit shorter. I think the only one that breaks my rule of being over 300 pages is this one, which I'll talk about, which is Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. This one I think is a perfect read if you're wanting something that is not necessarily super short, but isn't going to take you ages, like one of his Stormlight Archive book, if you will, and it's only a standalone in its world, so you don't have to worry about committing to a series. This is where you're gonna get it. It's got a wacky narrator. It's based off of The Princess Bride. You're gonna have good humor. It's gonna be a little kooky weird, and it's set on a sea of spores. Like, it's so fun. And it gives the character, the female figure in Princess Bride, more agency. It turns her kind of into the Wesley character, and I think it's just fabulous. Also a good choice to do if you are a fan of the Princess Bride movie, because it has that flavor that you want, that like nostalgic, kooky, kind of satirical dialogue. It's so good. I do have to say, my friend who doesn't really read high fantasy, she prefers urban fantasy, or like in the vein of like Addie LaRue kind of fantasy. She picked this up and she adored it. She was like, this was so fun. She listened to the audiobook and just absolutely loved it. So it is for everybody, and you can pick it up even if you haven't read any other Brandon's. Trust me, you will still enjoy it, even if you don't catch all of the Easter eggs and stuff like that of the rest of us who have read more of his books. I didn't even pick them all up because I haven't read all the Cosmere, so I really enjoy this, and I highly recommend. Other than that, we also have The Book Eaters by Sun Yi Dean. So this one's just at the 300 page mark. Yeah, the acknowledgements ends on page 298 on my copy. This one I read in one day. I couldn't put it down. It felt like, when you pick it up for the first time, it feels like one of those, like, Snatched, or what is it? Taken? I think that's what it is. Snatched. I think it's Taken with Liam Neeson. It feels like one of those movies off the top, just because it's like, it's set in like a grittier London setting with this girl who's kind of on the run and just feels like she's in danger, kind of a thing. And it just follows like such interesting world building and very almost like vampiric characters, but they're called book eaters because they consume books. It also, like, it has our main character, who I don't remember the name of, Devon. She is a book eater, but her son is a mind eater, which is a whole other ball game in this world and with the families, if you will. So definitely a really interesting fantasy thriller leaning book that I couldn't put down, and I really enjoyed. I gotta talk about Piranesi, because Piranesi was definitely a weird read, and it was slow but it was also something that I read in like 3 hours in one sitting one day, just totally entrenched in this story. And I mention it because it is small. Is it the 300 page mark rule? It's like 240 some pages. So it is under the 300 page mark, and it's definitely such an interesting read because you don't necessarily know what's going on. Neither does Piranesi, our main character. He's just kind of hanging out, living his life in these halls. And you slowly kind of unravel the mystery as Piranesi does. It was so good, and Susanna Clarke's writing is just so exceptional. It's so vivid and imaginative. I love this book so much, and I think it would be a perfect book to read, kind of to bridge like a different genre. Like, if you're super into mystery books, try Piranesi and like get a taste of the fantasy, or on the other side, if you're really into fantasy books, get a taste of like mystery literary fiction in this as you try and unwind the mystery with Piranesi. Then of course, I gotta mention them because it's cozy fantasy, and I think cozy fantasy is probably one of the best palette cleansers you can have. because not only is it a good palate cleanser from all these epic fantasies that you're reading, but still keeping in a magical world, it leans into romance book space without committing to like a contemporary romance. And I say that because my own books are perfect for this. Well, at least a second story is, because a second story is under 300 pages long. The actual narrative ends on page 266. Definitely fun, snappy, beautiful, wonderful read. Please read my book. Please. I don't think that A Little Luck is going to be in the same category because it is like 25,000 words more than a second story is. It's going to be definitely thicker and more than 300 pages long, but cozy fantasy is definitely a good choice. So this is a queer cozy fantasy set by the sea where two adventurers, Ari and Finn, decide to stop adventuring, retire, and buy a bookstore by the sea together. It's got found family, anxiety rep, HGTV renos, there's a bookstore cat who adopts them, all that kind of stuff. You guys have heard me pitch my book so many times. And in that same vein, Legends of Lattes. Again, it's shorter. This copy. Oh, this is the short story attached to it. Okay, so this copy is just at 300 pages with the short story, but the actual narrative, 254 pages long. So definitely a great read. It is a perfect palate cleanser, and it is the king of cozy fantasy. It's exceptional. It's the best. I love this book. One of my favorite books of all time. Inspired my own book. It's about Viv, who decides to retire from adventuring and bring coffee into the world and open a coffee shop. And it's a little bit sapphic as well. It's so good. And such a quick read too. That's what I really love about Legends of Lattes. So quick. Such a wonderful read. Oh, I almost forgot to mention. There's also Moon of the Crusted Snow by Wabgishig Rice. This one's a little bit outside of the genres that I've been talking about because this one is pure thriller suspense. This one I read for university, and I know it's very small. Cannot for the life of me find my copy. I must have gotten rid of it in the move or something. I read it in university. One of my favored books that I read. It is creepy and suspenseful and just keeps you on the edge of your toes the whole time because it is a power outage on this res that is outside of Ontario. And it's them living through this power outage in the winter and also finding out that the power outage isn't just isolated to them. It's like at least nationwide kind of a thing. So it's fun. That one is fun. And I believe Wabgishig Rice also has another one coming out that I think is connected this year or is out. And I really want to get my hands on it because I really enjoyed this read and it was very quick and just really suspenseful to get you going. So I wanted to also mention that one because I know it's a little out of the genres that I've been talking about today, but it's great. All right. I also wanted to, at the end here, mention 4 more that are on my TBR that I haven't read that you might also be interested in. So, keeping with the cozy fantasy theme, I have 2 here. I have Cursed Cocktails and Son of a Sailor. Both of these are under 300 pages. And I also have Natalia Hernandez's The Name Bearer, which is a smaller fantasy. This is a story of magia, warrior women, found family and love, and not accepting who you are told to be, but embracing who you are destined to become. So very excited to read this one and its sequel, which is over there. And I also have this shorter book, which is by Samit Basu, which is called The City Inside, which I believe is a sci-fi. It's published by Tor. That's why I picked it up, because Tor is the best. Anyways, my friends, that is it from me. I really hope you enjoyed, and I hope you found something to add to your TBR or help you out of a weird reading mood or a reading slump if you are in one. But yes, let me know down below some of your recommendations for these books, if they are shorter reads or if they are kind of genre breaking or some books that you love to reread. I would really love to know because of course I'm always adding to my list, especially if they're novellas, because I've only in the past few years really have like fallen in love with the idea of novellas because I'm the kind of person who really struggles with shorter form stuff because usually it's just not enough for me. But some novellas really do it right. So if you have a novella that you really love, please let me know what it is because I will read it. Yes, my friends, thank you so much for watching and I will catch you in another video very soon. Stay kind and keep on reading.